You ever notice how everyone online seems to be hitting some huge money milestone right on schedule? By 30, you should have this. By 40, you should have that. By 50, you're supposed to be halfway to millionaire status. And if you're sitting there at 32 with a decent job, a retirement account that still looks too small, maybe some savings, maybe some debt, maybe a car payment you regret a little, it starts to feel like you missed the class where everyone learned how money actually works. And that feeling is brutal, because it doesn't just make you feel behind. It makes you feel like a failure. Like you somehow did adulthood wrong. But here's the part almost nobody says clearly. Most Americans are not hitting these wealth milestones nearly as early as the internet makes it seem. In fact, if you look at real household net worth data, not cherry-picked success stories, not finance Twitter, not the guy on YouTube who acts like everyone should have a seven-figure portfolio by 38, the typical American household doesn't even reach $100,000 in net worth until somewhere around the late 30s to early 40s. And most households never reach $500,000. Most never reach $1 million either. That's not a motivational slogan. That's the math. And once you understand that, two things happen. First, you stop comparing your real life to fake timelines. Second, you start seeing exactly why some people eventually build serious wealth and most people stay stuck running in place. Think about someone like Marcus. He's 36, lives outside Charlotte, works in operations for a logistics company, makes $88,000 a year, and feels like he should be doing better than he is. His wife makes another $52,000 as a dental hygienist. Together they bring in enough money that from the outside, they look fine. They've got a house, 2 cars, 1 kid in daycare, a couple vacations a year, though lately those are going on a credit card more than he'd like to admit. He has around $41,000 in his 401k. She has maybe $18,000 in hers. They've got $7,500 in savings. And if you asked him whether he feels like a family on the path to wealth, he'd laugh. Because every month still feels tight. Not broke, exactly. Just weirdly squeezed. And that's the modern middle-class financial experience in America. You make enough to look stable, but not enough to feel ahead. So Marcus does what millions of people do. He opens up an article or a video about net worth by age, and suddenly he's hit with those benchmark numbers. You should have 1 times your salary saved by 30, 3 times by 40, 6 times by 50. And now he's not just worried about bills. Now he's worried he's failing at life. Look, this is where people get tricked. They confuse high-performing households with normal households. They confuse averages with medians. And those are not the same thing. Not even close. The average gets pulled upward by people with huge balances. Business owners. High-income dual professional couples. People who bought homes at the perfect time. People who maxed retirement accounts for 20 straight years. The median is the middle. It shows what the typical household actually looks like. And the typical household is way less impressive than the internet wants you to believe. That's why this conversation matters. Because once you stop asking, what age should I be at $500,000? And start asking, what age do most people actually get there? The answer changes completely. And it gets uncomfortable fast. The first milestone is $100,000. This is the one that matters most psychologically, because below that level, building wealth feels like pushing a shopping cart with 1 broken wheel. You're moving, technically, but it takes way more effort than it should. The first $100,000 is hard because it's mostly you. Your savings, your discipline, your consistency, your ability to avoid blowing up your progress every time life gets expensive or your income goes up. When you only have $10,000 invested, a great year in the market doesn't change your life. At 10%, that's $1,000. Helpful, sure. but it doesn't feel transformative. At $25,000, a strong year is better, but still not enough to make you feel rich. Even at $50,000, the market is not doing the heavy lifting yet. You are? You're still the engine. And that's why so many people get frustrated in the early years. They expect compounding to feel magical long before the pile is big enough to compound in a way they can actually notice. That's also why the first $100,000 takes so long for normal people. Not lazy people. Not careless people. Normal people. People with rent or mortgages. People with student loans. People with kids. People paying $700 a month for a car because everyone around them normalized it. People earning more than their parents did on paper, but somehow feeling less secure in real life. A lot of households are trying to invest while also constantly putting out financial fires. One dental bill. One HVAC repair. One layoff. One emergency flight. One stupid decision made during a good income year. That's all it takes to knock someone off track for 12 months. Sometimes longer. So when people talk casually about hitting $100,000 by 30, like it's a normal checkpoint, they're describing a top-tier savings path, not a median American life. And once you understand that, the next reveal makes more sense. If the first $100,000 takes the typical household until the late 30s or early 40s, then $500,000 and $1 million are not just later versions of the same thing. They require a completely different level of time, surplus cash flow, and behavioral stability. This is where the internet really messes people up. It treats wealth like a straight staircase. Just save a little more, invest a little longer, and obviously you'll be a millionaire. But wealth is not a staircase. It's more like trying to get a heavy flywheel spinning. At first it barely moves. Then eventually it turns faster. Then one day it has enough momentum that it starts helping itself. But most people never get to that stage because they keep interrupting the spin. That's the real story behind why most Americans don't hit $500,000 or $1 million. It's not usually that they were one promotion short. It's that their cash flow never had enough oxygen for long enough. Every major financial decision either feeds that flywheel or fights it. A too expensive house fights it. A giant car payment fights it. Carrying revolving debt fights it. Constant lifestyle upgrades fight it. Pulling money out of retirement accounts when changing jobs absolutely destroys it. And the cruel part is that none of these decisions feel catastrophic in the moment. They feel normal. That's why they're dangerous. Nobody says, "I'm about to delay my net worth by 8 years." They say, "We can make the payment work." Nobody says, "I'm about to trap my future cash flow." They say, "We deserve a nicer place." Nobody says, "I'm resetting compounding." They say, "I just need to borrow from myself this once." Marcus is the perfect example. The reason he doesn't feel wealthy is not because he's irresponsible. It's because most of his financial life was built around maintaining appearances of stability instead of maximizing long-term freedom. A mortgage that looked reasonable. 2 cars that felt deserved. Spending that tracked upward every time income rose. Enough retirement saving to feel responsible, but not enough to really change the trajectory. So on paper, he's doing all the right adult things. In reality, he's making progress at half speed. And that's what so many middle-class Americans are doing. They're not financially reckless. They're just financially deluded. Too many good enough decisions stacked on top of each other until there's never enough force left over to create wealth. Now, here's where the story changes. Because once a household does reach $100,000, the emotional math starts to shift. At $100,000, a 10% year means $10,000. Suddenly, the market can create a number that feels real. At $250,000, A strong year can produce the kind of growth that used to require months of work. At $500,000, a decent market year can look like a full extra salary. At $1 million, money starts behaving differently. Same percentages. Completely different lived experience. That's why people who already have money sound so calm when they talk about investing. They're not necessarily smarter. Their pile is just heavy enough that gravity is finally on their side. But this is the part people miss. Getting from $100,000 to $500,000 is not just an investing challenge. It's a behavior challenge. It's the point where your lifestyle either stays contained or it expands every time life gives you a little room. And most people let it expand. That's the trap. They finally get some financial breathing room, then immediately spend it on a nicer version of normal. Better car, bigger house, more subscriptions, more dining out, better vacations, better everything. Nothing outrageous. Just enough to make sure the extra income never becomes real wealth. This is why high earners so often feel broke. Because income can rise while investable surplus stays tiny. And if surplus stays tiny, milestone ages keep sliding further away. There are plenty of people making $150,000 who are years behind people making $85,000. Not because they earn less, because they keep upgrading faster than they save. Wealth is not a reward for appearing successful. It's a reward for keeping a gap between what comes in and what goes out, then protecting the gap for years. That's it. That's the game people keep trying to overcomplicate. The age you hit $100,000, $500,000, or $1 million is mostly a reflection of how long you maintained the gap and whether you gave compounding enough uninterrupted time to work. So let's answer the title as honestly as possible. Most Americans who reach $100,000 in household net worth hit it around the late 30s to early 40s. That's the first real milestone where money starts to feel less fragile. Most Americans do not hit $500,000 at all, at least not if we're talking about the typical household. Some do, obviously, but not most. And most do not hit $1 million either. The people who usually got there through a combination of time, home equity, retirement contributions, market growth, and years of not doing anything too destructive. That's a much less exciting answer than start a side hustle and invest in these three things. But it's also a lot more useful. Because once you realize that most people never get there, the goal stops being to follow some fake age benchmark and starts becoming something far more practical. You stop asking, "Am I behind compared to an internet millionaire?" and start asking, "Am I on a path that actually leads somewhere?" That is a way better question. A 29-year-old with $18,000 saved and a strong savings rate may be in a healthier position than a 39-year-old with $120,000 and no room to invest. A 42-year-old who finally got serious and is investing aggressively every month can still build a very respectable net worth. A couple that caps housing and car costs can outperform another couple making far more money but spending every raise. Direction matters more than people think. A snapshot can lie. A trajectory usually doesn't. And that should be motivating, not depressing. Because if most households never hit $500,000 or $1 million, then becoming the exception does not require genius. It requires not playing by default settings. It requires noticing that modern American life is perfectly designed to make middle-income people look successful while staying financially average forever. That's the machine. Financing everything. Upgrading everything. Normalizing debt. Mistaking busyness for progress and income for wealth. The people who escape that don't usually look dramatic from the outside. They just make fewer expensive, normal decisions. They buy less house than the bank says they can afford. They keep cars longer. They increase investments right after a raise instead of waiting until the end of the month and hoping something is left. They don't panic and cash out. They don't use every good year as an excuse to get looser. They understand that the middle part of wealth building is supposed to feel boring. That's not failure. That's the process working. Quietly. Repeatedly. For years. So if you're watching this at 27 or 35 or 44 and you feel behind, let me give you a better frame. You do not need to ask what age you are supposed to become wealthy. You need to ask whether your current system makes wealth likely. Because that's the only question that matters now. If your fixed costs are too high, fix them. If your savings rate is weak, strengthen it. If every raise disappears, catch it sooner. If your financial life looks successful but feels fragile, that's your signal. Don't ignore it. Most people stay average not because they were doomed, but because they stayed on autopilot too long. And that's the final reveal here. The age most people reach $100,000, $500,000, or $1 million is not really a story about age. It's a story about design. The people who hit those milestones earlier usually did not discover a secret. They just built a life with enough margin for money to accumulate instead of constantly evaporate. That's what wealth is, underneath all the numbers. Stored margin, stored discipline, stored time. Which means your future net worth is being shaped right now, not by one giant decision, but by the recurring structure of your life. So no, you are probably not as late as you think. But you may be later than you need to be if you keep copying the same expensive patterns that made most people fall short in the first place. And honestly, that should light a fire under you. Not a panic fire. A clarity fire. The kind that makes you go home, open your accounts, look at your fixed costs, increase one contribution, cut one stupid expense, and finally start acting like wealth is built in the boring months, not the exciting ones. Because that's the truth. Most Americans never hit $500,000. Most never hit $1 million. But the ones who do usually aren't superheroes. They just stopped bleeding momentum. And once that happens, time starts doing something incredible. It stops feeling like the thing you're running out of, and starts becoming the thing working for you.